Halifax, Nova Scotia. The late winter wind sliced through Ian as they walked the streets of Halifax toward the harbor. It had snowed the night before, a dusting that still clung to the tree branches and rooftops of the stone and brick buildings of downtown Halifax. Sunlight sent sparkles into Ian's vision. People strolled by wrapped in colorful scarves, smiling at the blue sky and twinkling snow. Canadians, Ian thought darkly. Why are they always so happy? Even though he was hunched against the chill, Ian's brain was working feverishly. He'd caught up on sleep on the plane from Geneva, but he hadn't had time to develop a plan, just a direction. He had to come up with something before they hit the harbor. They were already in the morning of the second day, and he could feel the clock ticking. The ships coming into port were posted online, but the information was sparse. They needed detailed information about cargo, and the only place to get that would be the Port Authority office. He glanced over at Amy, who was chatting quietly with Hamilton. Had she thought of a plan, but just didn't want to share it until he came up with something? He'd already asked for her help. He didn't want to have to do it again. It would be nice if she would just volunteer something. Ian massaged his temples as if he could squeeze some ideas out of them. His strategic brilliance was his strength, his mojo, as Jonah would say. Somehow his brain didn't seem to be functioning. Instead, a movie was playing in his head, a constant loop of the same scenes. His pants falling down, the outcast appearing on the screen, being tossed out of the mansion like a bag of garbage. Kara drifted back toward him, matching her stride to his. You've been quiet. Thinking about failure, Ian said. It's a new sensation. Anyone who risks big fails big. Did you get that from a fortune cookie? Ian asked bitterly. No, I got beware Brit fuffs who enjoy feeling sorry for themselves. Thanks a lot, Ian said, stung. The next time I need help, I know where not to go. Kara sighed. Why do you have to be such a jerk? I can't help my upbringing, he muttered. Cabras were raised to be awful. So were Pierces. That's why you and I understand each other. We have to fight our genes. This is supremely unhelpful. Look, I'm just saying, if you're the leader of the Cahills, things are going to go wrong. Like, all the time. But did it have to happen while I was standing in my underwear? Okay, that was unfortunate, but I was humiliated. Kara flashed the one dimple that, under normal circumstances, could disarm him completely. At least you have nice legs. They threw me out. Magnus called me a crybaby. He was trying to get to you, to get inside your head, and have you noticed? It worked. Ian said nothing. Better to be silent when you're cornered. Do you want my advice? Kara asked. No. Ian stomped on, thrusting his hands in his pockets. If he went to Kara for advice, she'd have the upper hand. Then she'd never think of him as boyfriend material. That's what his father always said. When it comes to women, Ian, I'll give you this piece of advice. Maintain your superiority at all times. Ian paused. Was he really willing to take advice from his father? He cleared his throat. Well, if you insist, stop worrying about your stupid dignity and start worrying about the innocent people who just might die because some crazy old guy is making a power grab. You're feeling sorry for yourself, and we don't have time for that. So get over yourself, Cabra. Just when I thought I'd get some sympathy. If you want a pep talk, find a different girl. Ian, you've got to stop focusing on yourself and focus on other people. You'd be a lot happier and a better leader. She yanked him to a stop. Ian almost slipped on the ice, but she caught him. Must you always knock me about? He complained. Yes, until you listen to me. Really listen. Ian faced her. A sudden burst of wind sent the snow flying, a shower of diamonds that drifted into Kara's hair. You think I'm an egotistical fool, don't you? He asked. He said, well, sure, everyone does. Because you are. One side of her mouth quirked upward in the lopsided smile that always did something squishy to Ian's knees, but not all the time. She nudged him again, but less fiercely. There's hope for you yet. Ian felt his heart swell. His charm was working after all. He still had it. She was softening. He could see it. In the middle of all this trouble and darkness, this would be his light. Kara. I don't care what everybody thinks, he said, and was about to add, I care what you think very much. But Kara scowled. You should care what they think, she said, gesturing toward the group, because they'd go to the wall for you. Until you realize that, no matter how well you do, you'll still be a loser. With that, Kara turned and marched down the street toward the group, not caring if he followed. Crikey, that didn't go so well. She'll come around. They always do. Because you're a cabra. Ian pressed his fist to his forehead. This time, he tried to pummel out the memory of Vikram Cabra. Get out of my head, father. I don't need your advice. He hurried to catch up without looking as though he was hurrying. What's our cover story? Dan asked. Why would a bunch of kids need shipping records? There isn't a reason, Ian said. This part he'd already figured out. We have to get Kara into an interior office so she can invade their computer. Do you think you'll be able to access the shipping details? He asked her. Child's play, she said. What we need is a distraction, Ian said. Then add confusion. Ian nearly collided with a little girl who darted out of a toy store. Her mother ran after her with an apologetic smile. Ian scowled. The little girl wore a blue wool hat pulled down to her eyebrows and carried a big yellow balloon. "Today's my birthday," she called to Ian. For a second, he was merely irritated. Why did little kids assume that other people wanted to hear their boring trivialities? And no doubt that balloon would just get in the way of pedestrians. Right now, it was bobbing in Kara's face, and he couldn't believe how cheerfully she batted it away. Then he had an idea. "Happy birthday," he said to the little girl in his warmest tone. Kara smiled at him. Ian had forgotten how girls thought it was cute when guys were nice to kids. Something to remember for later. He'd rent a whole kindergarten class if it meant Kara would smile at him again. Maybe that was what he needed to do. Plot the conquest of Kara's heart, like a Lucian. But first, it was time to unfurl his brilliant plan.